Constantin Valdor, the Emperor's golden executioner, first among the custodies, and a man so dangerous he makes space marines look like mall cops.
Sweet mercy!
But here's the real question. Could he actually kill a Primarch? Could Big Daddy E's favorite oily boy take down one of his degenerate sons in a straight-up fight? Could he outduel Fulgrim, the galaxy's top duelist and part-time ketamine enthusiast? Or slap Gilliman, everyone's favorite blueberry and master of Excel, right back to Ultramar? Well, today, we're gonna find out. Now, this whole video actually comes from you guys. One of my herd dropped a comment asking if Valdor could actually kill a Primarch, and I was like, well, I actually don't know that. Because on one hand, Valdor is capable of slaying greater demons for fun and swings a weapon that could pretty much one-shot anyone. But on the other hand, the Primarchs are literal demigods, and to put it simply, are built different. It's the ultimate unstoppable force meets immovable object, and I'm hyped to break this all down. So here's how we're gonna do it. First, we'll break down who Valdor really is and why he's considered one of the strongest warriors in the entire galaxy. Then we'll look at his feats, his weapons, and his power level to see how he stacks up. After that, we're gonna compare him to the Primarchs themselves, loyalist and traitor, and really ask, could he kill them? And finally, we'll go deep into theory mode with the King in Yellow and see if that changes the fight at all. If you're new to my channel, I actually do read your comments, and if you drop me a great moving idea like this one, there's a good chance I'll make a video about it in the future. So keep those comments coming, herd. With all of this said, it's time to power scale. So who is Constantin Valdor? Valdor, known as the Emperor's Spear, was one of the very first custodians ever created. His direct origins are shrouded in mystery, but what we do know is that he served the Emperor through the Unification Wars, the Great Crusade, and the Horus Heresy as a leader of the Custodians as first Captain General, and a member of the ruling Triumvirate alongside the Emperor and Malcador the Sigillite. As the Horus Heresy began, Valdor was dispatched with the Space Wolves to Prospero to censor Magnus the Red after violating the psychic ban enforced by the Council of Nicaea. There, he would cut down countless Thousand Sun Psychers, including over 30 Kinet-type Blade Masters who were psychically linked Space Marines, meaning that when you fought one, you fought all of them, like a squad of mini Pains from Naruto. Valdor reportedly sustained just one wound while cutting down all of them. What an absolute monster. During the Siege of Terra, Valdor defended the Colossi Gate before joining the Emperor, Sanguinius, and Dorn on their mission to board the Vengeful Spirit, which, as everyone knows, did not go to plan.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
Valdor and his custodians were separated and ended up fighting through an endless horde of demons and corrupted marines, only to arrive too late. They found Sanguinius dead, Horus slain, and the Emperor mortally wounded. After the Emperor was interned on the Golden Throne and the scouring began, Valdor completed his duty and then vanished. Valdor's ultimate fate was a mystery until some new, wild lore dropped. I say new, but Dan Abnett's novel Penitent came out in 2021, which, let me check my notes, was 4 years ago. Time isn't real anyways, guys, and as we all know, 40K sucks at updating the setting. In that book, Inquisitors Eisenhorn and Ravenor uncover a cipher in the City of Dust with a single name, Constantin Valdor, which heavily implies that the shadowy figure known as the King in Yellow is him. So who is the King in Yellow and why does that matter? The King in Yellow is a mysterious figure deeply tied to the heretical, chaos-dabbling cult called the Cognitae. And okay, sidebar, I'm asking a lot of questions in this video. Who are the Cognitae? I feel like an owl. Who? Sorry, autistic cow moment. The Cognitae are a network of cults that use psychic training, cloning, and forbidden sciences to create agents meant to destabilize the Imperium in the name of chaos. They've been a recurring enemy in the Eisenhorn stories, and now they seem to serve, or maybe be served by, the King in Yellow. The King in Yellow's goal is nothing less than finding the Emperor's true name, which would grant him power over the Master of Mankind. To achieve this, he's traveled to places like the Planet of Sorcerers, Sicarius, and even the Black Library. He commands an army of clone blanks, winged space marines, and maybe custodians. His throne resides in the City of Dust, a pocket dimension existing somewhere between real space and the warp. I kinda went down a Yellow King rabbit hole, but I feel like this is necessary since we'll be theorizing if this is indeed Valdor and how he scales to Primarchs in this form. But we'll circle back to him later. And that brings us to the big question. How does Constantin Valdor, the Emperor's Spear and one of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy, stack up against a Primarch? We're going to look at his feats, weapons, and combat skill, and then dive into whether he could actually kill one of the Emperor's sons. Let's start with the obvious. Valdor is a Custodes. In fact, he's basically the Custody, the literal peak of the Emperor's bodyguard, the golden standard of the Golden Boys. This means he's rocking absurdly enhanced speed, strength, reflexes, durability, and combat skill. Now technically, there's nothing in the lore that outright says Valdor is genetically superior to the other Custodians, but he's clearly different. The Emperor's first and favorite, the one he trusted to lead the 10,000. Whether it's skill, experience, or some secret sauce that Big E cooked into him, Valdor consistently performs at a level that puts him at borderline Primarch tier in finesse and precision. He is a living weapon, meticulously honed and battle-forged, a nightmare for anyone dumb enough to step in his way. What about his weapons though? Well, Valdor wields the infamous Apollonian Spear, which has a twin, the Spear of Rus, or originally known as the Dionysian Spear, which the Emperor would later give to Leman Russ. While the Spear of Rus reveals truths to the one cut by the blade, the Apollonian Spear reveals truths to its wielder about whoever it strikes. That means when Valdor runs someone through with it, be it a Chaos Marine, Demon, or Heretic, he doesn't just kill them, he learns their secrets. It's like a lie detector, a Chaos Radar, and a can opener all in one shiny murder stick. The Spear also carries anti-chaos properties similar to its sister weapon, making Valdor a nightmare for anything that crawls out of the warp. It's basically a demon do not touch button. Then there's his armor, the Constantin Warplate. Now I know my punctuation is pretty frickin' bad, guys, but I think I said that one right. Please don't bash me in the comments. It was worked by the same artificers that forged the Emperor's own warplate, and was proof against all but the most destructive attacks and most terrible weapons. So what feats does Valdor actually pull off during his run in 30k? Like I said earlier, Valdor is clearly built different, and the lore gives us several moments that cement him as an apex predator on the battlefield. Some of his most famous feats include slaughtering over 30 Kinetic Blade Masters of the 1,000 Suns in a single engagement. These weren't your average Astartes, they were psychically linked, allowing them to move and strike as one entity, and Valdor still cut them all down, sustaining only a single wound. He's displayed absurd superhuman strength, casually tossing a fully armored Custodian across a room with one punch, and even hurling tanks around in battle. These are the kind of raw strength feats usually reserved for Primarchs. He's also carved his way through the vengeful spirit during the Siege of Terra, as Valdor and his Custodes fought through demon-infested corridors, facing endless waves of traitor marines and demonic horrors with surgical precision, all while pushing deeper into Horus's flagship. And if that wasn't impressive enough, during the Siege of Terra, he holds the passageways underneath the palace all by himself, killing an obscene amount of traitors and demons. So from these feats alone, we can see that Valdor comfortably scales above your average Space Marine, and likely even most other Custodes. He is the Emperor's Spear for a reason. Now to help me scale Valdor against the Primarchs, we need to answer the question, did Valdor ever fight a Primarch in 30k? Because if we can find a direct clash between him and one of the Emperor's demigod sons, that would be the ultimate benchmark for figuring out how he really stacks up against them. Lucky for me, Valdor did have an encounter with a Primarch, but before getting into that, first I need to address a piece of lore that is completely incorrect regarding Valdor fighting Horus Lubercal. Throughout the Warhammer community, there is a perpetual myth that Constantin Valdor beat Horus Lubercal in a sparring match, which stems from a typo edit in the 40k wiki that accidentally swapped Russ beat Horus in a sparring match with Constantine beat Horus in a sparring match.
What are you? An idiot sandwich.
Yet, this is a misconception that is all over the community and has been for years. So no, Horus did not fight Valdor. But just because he never fought Horus doesn't mean Valdor's record against Primarchs is empty. He absolutely has one canon duel that gives us a window into how he stacks up, and that's his brief clash with Alpharius, Primarch of the Alpha Legion. This happens in the book Alpharius Headed the Hydra, and while it's a very short exchange, it does give us a great insight into this question. After a quick fight, Valdor remarks, "No other being of which I am aware of could come close to matching me in combat." A remark Alpharius is surprised by, thinking to himself, "Come close to?" I filed that away for future reference. We had matched each other utterly in the few seconds we had been engaged, and Valdor had been wearing powered armor that enhanced his movements and reflexes. Should I ever have a similar suit, I would be intrigued to try the Captain General once more. From this duel, I gathered that Valdor is evenly matched with Alpharius in pure blade work, which is honestly a pretty insane feat.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Alpharius himself was shocked that Valdor could hold his own, trading blow for blow without immediately getting folded like an old deck chair. But some important context for this fight, Valdor was in full Custodes power armor, amped up with enhanced reflexes and protection, while Alpharius on the other hand was literally wearing a simple cloak. This wasn't a perfect one-to-one duel, it was kind of like one guy bringing a gun to a knife fight. Alpharius even implies in his inner monologue that if he had been fully geared for the battle, things might have gone very differently. That context is crucial because it frames just how insane Valdor's skill really is. From this, I can confidently conclude that Valdor is an absolutely absurd duelist. His blade work is so refined that he can have an even exchange against a Primarch in the opening moments of a fight. But I believe there's still a gap in raw power and endurance. I think it's completely fair to assume that while Valdor can hang in the initial flurry of combat, over time a Primarch would eventually take control. They're simply in another weight class. Just think about it. A Primarch is a literal warp-forged demigod crammed into a humanoid frame with physiology that's barely mortal anymore. A Custodes, even the greatest one ever made, is still human at his core, genetically engineered to the razor's edge of perfection, sprinkled with a bit of the Emperor's semen.
What? What the fuck?
But not a walking demigod. Valdor can trade blows, maybe even kill in the right conditions, but in a drawn-out slugfest, it's a really tough debate. But hey, I still haven't fully made my verdict yet. Let's throw Valdor into the ultimate duelist pit and see how he fares against Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children, the galaxy's most elegant part-time ketamine enthusiast. Alright, let's talk about Fulgrim. He's one of the greatest duelists, probably up there with the Lion and Sanguinius. This is the guy who in the early Great Crusade was described as moving faster than the eye could track and was easily cutting through Xenos, including choking out a literal avatar of Cain. And then later, during the beginnings of the Horus heresy, he would fight and kill his brother Primarch, Ferrus Manus. In this video, I'm not going down the rabbit hole of Demon Primarch Fulgrim, so we'll be chiefly looking at Fulgrim before sprouting a tail. So this is base Fulgrim we're looking at, who I believe to be the 6th strongest Primarch, or somewhere around that area. And since we already mentioned Alpharius earlier in the video, I would say he comes in around 17th or 18th in my Primarch rankings, meaning he is one of the weaker Primarchs. So where does that leave Valdor? Once again, Valdor's blade work and precision are absolutely incredible. He's the best duelist humanity can offer, and his fight with Alpharius proves he can at least hang with the Primarch in the opening exchanges. His Apollonian spear is a tailor-made weapon for killing dangerous foes, and it even has anti-chaos properties, which would help against Fulgrim if he was fully corrupted, which in this case, he's not. Oof. In the first few seconds of a duel, Valdor might even look like he's winning, parrying strikes, countering with terrifying speed, and maybe even landing a glancing blow or two. But in my humble cow opinion, Fulgrim would still win. Why? Because dueling a Primarch isn't just about technique. It's about raw speed, power, and endurance. Fulgrim's body is built to sustain a fight far longer than Valdor's ever could. One mistake, one hit from his Primarch sword, and it's game over. And over the course of a prolonged duel, the sheer weight class difference would begin to show. A Custodian, even Valdor, is the peak of human potential. but a Primarch is a warp-forged demigod in a mortal body. And remember, when Valdor dueled Alpharius, he was fighting one of the weaker Primarchs, and Alpharius didn't even have armor on. So if he fought Fulgrim in the exact same situation, I would put money on the Ketamine abuser. And if we go even more down the lore hole, let's look at Prospero. During the duel between Leman Russ and Magnus the Red, an apocalyptic clash that literally leveled parts of the planet, Valdor was present, and he did absolutely nothing. He didn't even try to intervene, and to me, that says everything. If Valdor thought he could contribute meaningfully to the fight between two Primarchs, he would have stepped in. The fact that he didn't heavily implies that he knew he wouldn't have been able to seriously harm either party. So drawing the ultimate conclusion, Valdor is the greatest Custodes to ever live and a warrior who could hang with a Primarch in a short burst of time. But kill one? I think that's too tall a task. His blade work might let him survive for a while, but sooner or later, biology, warp-forged might, and sheer durability will win the day. So no, I do not think that Constantin Valdor could kill a Primarch. But we're not done yet, guys. As you can tell from the video length, we're just getting started. Time to strap on our cow-shaped tinfoil hats and dive into the deepest of deep lore holes. It's Yellow King time. And here's a new question: if Valdor really is this mysterious figure, would he finally be able to take on a Primarch? What new powers would he wield? What weapons would he carry? Because it's autistic cow time. So what kind of powers could the King in Yellow actually have? Well, if the theories are true and this is Valdor's new form, he's gone from a purely physical powerhouse to something far stranger and far more dangerous. The King in Yellow operates out of the City of Dust, a pocket dimension that exists between the warp and real space, which already suggests some level of warp manipulation or reality bending abilities. It's even theorized that through centuries of using the Apollonian Spear, Valdor may have absorbed too much knowledge of the warp. Every kill, every truth he extracted from demons and traitors, slowly teaching him things mortal minds were never meant to know. This could explain how he's able to manipulate the warp to create realms like the City of Dust or vanish entirely from Imperial sight. And there's also his obsession with discovering the Emperor's true name, which implies a level of metaphysical or psychic understanding that could let him influence or even control beings tied to the warp. If the King in Yellow really does have some sort of warp manipulation, it's not crazy to think that Valdor might have enhanced his own form in the process. Imagine a Valdor who's no longer just a peak human warrior, but a pseudo-Primarch in his own right. A being who can enhance his reflexes, speed, and strength beyond what his biology could originally sustain. Warp manipulation could allow him to mend injuries mid-battle, hit harder than ever, or move with near precognitive awareness.
Oh my god, he's so goddamn cool!
The way some demon princes or chaos enhanced champions do. And because of all those truths he's carved out with the Apollonian Spear, Valdor might now even be capable of speaking Enuncia, the reality binding language which is capable of destroying demons, humans, and resetting reality itself. Combine that with his insane blade work and anti-warp bite of the Apollonian Spear, and suddenly the King in Yellow Valdor goes from just an elite duelist to a walking nightmare on the battlefield. So would this warp-enhanced, Enuncia-speaking, reality-bending King in Yellow Valdor be actually able to kill a Primarch? I feel like this question is a little bit easier than the other one. I mean, look at his toolset. He's already the greatest swordsman humanity ever produced, with blade work sharp enough to hold his own against Alpharius. Add to that warp manipulation, the potential to enhance his speed, strength, and durability beyond mortal limits, and maybe even foresight awareness that lets him read a fight before it happens. Then sprinkle on Enuncia, a reality-binding language that could theoretically tear open the warp or unmake enemies with words alone. Against a Primarch like Fulgrim, he could theoretically dictate the fight, using speed, precision, and warp tricks to level the playing field. And against someone like Guilliman, he could overwhelm the Excel spreadsheet king before the Blueberry even processed the first swing. Here's my opinion on it. If King in Yellow Valdor really has Enuncia and warp knowledge on top of his legendary blade work, a fight against a Primarch would drop to low to mid difficulty. The man would just be too slippery, too precise, and too much of a reality bending problem for even a Primarch to handle. Let's walk through a cow hypothetical. Fulgrim waltzed into the city of dust, smug and flawless as always, swords twirling like he's auditioning for Circa de Slaanesh. He opens with a flurry of strikes, blades screaming, his speed turning him into a silver blur. Valdor meets him head on, the Apollonian spear sparking with every parry. His movement's fluid, almost like every blow is inevitable. For the first few moments, it's a dead even dance, Fulgrim's raw speed and strength against Valdor's precision and discipline. Then the fight suddenly tilts in Valdor's favor. He whispers a single word of Annuncia. Fulgrim is hurled against a nearby wall, crashing against it with enough velocity to knock Fulgrim's swords out of his hand and leave him defenseless for a moment. And a moment is all Constantin Valdor needs. The spear snaps forward like a golden flash, carving a deep wound across Fulgrim's torso, its edge splitting Fulgrim's flesh. From there, the fight is still brutal. Fulgrim rallies, and every exchange feels like death is a single misstep away. But Valdor's precognitive-like awareness and warp-infused insight lets him stay a step ahead. After a tense, whirling duel of feints and lethal counters, the final thrust takes Fulgrim down. This isn't a high difficult fight anymore. Annuncia and warp knowledge are just too damn broken. A Primarch might be broken as hell, but against someone who can just shut down reality, predict their moves, and carve their soul in the same swing, Valdor walks away battered but victorious. But let's pump the brakes for a second. Everything I just said about warp-infused pseudo-Primarch Valdor is awesome for the imagination, but I'll admit, that's definitely leaning into the cow-shaped tinfoil hat side of the theory. It's a reach to assume that Valdor is out here juicing himself up like a demon prince. So let's take a step back and approach this from a more grounded angle. Even if Valdor hasn't enhanced himself physically, I think there's a very reasonable case for him still being able to take a Primarch if he's operating as the King in Yellow. Why? Because the correlation that he knows the warp is basically undeniable. He's created a pocket realm in the City of Dust, he's got a literal army of null clones, and if he really is Valdor, he spent centuries absorbing truths from the Apollonian Spear, learning things mortal minds should never know. The guy would literally have a PhD in warp shenanigans at this point. This form is Professor Valdor.
Hi, I'm Renata Bliss, and I'm your freestyle dance teacher.
So imagine this version of Valdor, still the 30k peak duelist we know, but armed with forbidden warp knowledge. In this more grounded form, he would theoretically be able to imbue his weapons, set traps, or use subtle warp manipulations to tilt the fight. We know Primarchs are surprisingly vulnerable to warp effects. Corfarion literally smacked Guilliman around like a ragdoll, and Zardu Lyak basically Fortnite self-destructed himself and still messed up Dorn. Time and time again, warp trickery has humbled beings who are otherwise untouchable in raw combat. So if Valdor combined his insane blade work with targeted warp knowledge, I genuinely believe he could still take down a Primarch. He doesn't need to overpower them physically, he just needs to outthink them and outcut them. And history shows that Primarchs caught off guard by the warp tend to have a very bad day. Still, this version of Valdor would have a very hard time taking down a Primarch. A fight like this would be the definition of razor-thin margins. Valdor would have to play the fight perfectly, using every ounce of skill and every shard of warp insight to create that one decisive opening. Once again, we'll use Fulgrim as our test guinea pig since it's so fun to watch him get beat the fuck up. And he probably, as always, likes it. So Fulgrim once again steps into the City of Dust, smug and lethal, swords whirling in perfect arcs, and Valdor meets him without any physical advantage, just raw dueling might and experience. The first exchanges are brutal, each clash of steel sends shockwaves through the chamber. Fulgrim's raw speed and strength begin to press the advantage, his Primarch physiology simply outmuscling Valdor at every step. A single misstep here and Valdor is dead. But this Valdor is still one of the most dangerous minds in the Imperium. He feints, retreats, and waits for that one moment where Fulgrim overextends himself. Then he channels everything he's learned from the Apollonian Spear into a single targeted warp strike. He has to make that blow count, because if he doesn't land it, the fight is over. This is high diff, winner takes all combat. Valdor can win, but it's a chess match played at light speed, and he has to play a flawless game to walk away. Against a being like Fulgrim, or any Primarch for that matter, the margin for error is microscopic. So we compared him against a single Primarch, Fulgrim, the Emperor's favorite glitter-laced ketamine demon twink. That's quite the sentence. But let's kick it up a notch, guys. It's time for raw, unfiltered, autistic power scaling at its finest. I'm talking Valdor versus the whole damn Primarch cast, and we're not pulling punches. I'm gonna break them each into 3 rough tiers. Feel free to seethe in the comments if you disagree. I'll be there reading while eating dry cereal. Keep in mind, these Primarchs are all in base form. So no demon Primarchs or older forms of Primarchs like Guilliman or the Lion who have new upgrades in the 42nd millennium. These are exclusively the Primarchs from the Grey Crusade and the Horus Heresy era. So the 3 tiers we have are low tier Primarch, mid tier Primarch, and high tier Primarch. In low tier Primarch, we have Lorgar, Alpharius, Guilliman, Mortarion, Ferrus Manus, and Perturabo. In mid tier Primarchs, we have Horus Lubrical, Corvus Corax, Rogel Dorn, and Vulcan. And in high tier Primarchs, we have Leman Russ, Angron, the Khan, the Lion, Sanguinius, Magnus, Conrad Kurz, and Fulgrim. So let's compare each of these forms of Valdor: 30k Captain General Valdor, Grounded King in Yellow Valdor, and Pseudo Primarch King in Yellow Valdor. Each the different tiers of Primarchs to see how he fares, starting off with normal Valdor. And as much as I love the Golden Demigod, he isn't beating a Primarch. He couldn't even beat Alpharius without armor on, and remember folks, Alpharius is ranked with the low tier Primarchs. So if Valdor struggled to keep up with him, then I don't see him beating any of the other low tier Primarchs, even Lorgar. In general, he's punching slightly above his weight and would need the perfect conditions to win. This form of Valdor is once again a great duelist, but not a Primarch killer. Now let's bring in the grounded version of the King in Yellow. Valdor with centuries of warp knowledge, a custom-built death realm, and the Apollonian spear whispering forbidden truths in his ear like a Reddit thread. He's not transforming into a warp god, but he knows how to use the warp like a scalpel instead of a hammer. This version of Valdor washes the floor with the low-tier Primarchs. Most of them don't have the combat finesse or mental resistance to deal with perfectly timed warp-infused strikes. Lorgar's crying, Mortarion's stuck monologuing, Alpharius doesn't even know which twin he is anymore. They're done. Deleted. But once we step into mid-tier, it gets dicey. Horus, Dorn, Corax, Vulcan, these are war leaders with either serious raw strength, combat versatility, or actual plot armor. Valdor would have to land a perfect blow and avoid taking damage, which gets increasingly difficult the longer the fight drags on. And then high tier Primarchs, not even a chance. Angron, Russ, the Khan, or Sanguinius would rip this version of Valdor apart if he missteps even once. These are blade gods, psychers, or sheer rage monsters, and while warp tricks can catch someone off guard, they don't carry you while your spine's getting suplexed through the webway. And with our final form, let's let the autism off the leash. This is peak King in Yellow Valdor. Reality enhanced body, precognitive reflexes, and most importantly, Enuncia. The reality binding language that reshapes the laws of physics with a single syllable. This Valdor, he's a problem. He's a pseudo Primarch plus who can warp reality, cut through psychic defenses, and body people on both the material and metaphysical level. Low tier Primarch, deleted. Mid tier Primarch, difficult but definitely beatable. He'd have to use full mastery and precision. Vulcan could take an absurd beating due to his perpetual powers, but Valdor's reality hacks are just too broken. But high tier Primarch is where it gets juicy. Russ, Conrad, and Angron are all brutal melee fighters. Valdor could probably hang, but he'd need to keep his distance or overwhelm them with warp manipulation. Close-up brawls are dangerous with these folks. Fulgrim and the Khan are dance partners from hell, but Valdor's superior technique plus warp tricks might just edge it here. The Lion brings raw power, strategy, and stubbornness, which would make it a coin toss. Magnus and Sanguinius, these would be the 2 final bosses. Magnus can atomize souls with a glance, and Sanguinius has insane speed, psychic foresight, and literal angel wings. These are the only fights I'd call truly 50-50. Valdor would need to play absolutely perfect, using every warp trick, every swing of the spear, and dropping the Enuncia nuke at the right moment to win. So if Valdor goes full King in Yellow cheat code mode, he has the possibility of beating every base Primarch but only with precision, planning, and the power of metaphysical backhanding. But that's just base Primarchs, baby. We're not done. You're still watching? God bless your soul. You're deep in the milk hole now. Next up, we're diving into Horus Lupercal. Not base Horus. No. We're talking all the various forms of Horus Lupercal throughout the Horus Heresy. If you have not watched my power scaling Horus Lupercal video, go check it out. Horus in that video has 5 forms, and I'm gonna use those 5 forms here. So that's base or Great Crusade Horus, post Davin Horus, post Molech Horus, slaves to darkness Horus, and God Emperor Horus. So how would Valdor do against each of these forms of Horus? Once again, just like we just did with the Primarchs, each form of Valdor is gonna run the Gauntlet. His first form, 30k era Captain General Constantin Valdor, doesn't clear any version of Horus. It's a no-go. Valdor in his base state is insanely skilled, yes, but Horus even at his weakest is still a Primarch. That's just too tall a mountain to climb. His second form, the Grounded King in Yellow, the version of Valdor with deep warp knowledge but without the broken hacks, I think this version gets through base Horus and even post Davin Horus. Post Davin Horus is juiced up with basic chaos blessings, enhanced durability and strength, a little psychic sauce, and the whole I'm clearly falling thing. He's still very much in the same tier, just angrier and more corrupted. I think that's within this Valdor's reach. But I don't think this Valdor scales beyond post Molech Horus. After the Molech ritual, Horus gets a huge reality-breaking boost. He becomes the chosen vessel of all 4 Chaos Gods. That's Ascended Horus, baby. A true monster. Now yes, half his soul is missing, spoilers, which is a massive nerf, as half of Horus is literally still fighting the warp, fighting the corruption, which splits his essence and weakens his true potential. Still, I don't think Grounded King in Yellow Valdor punches past that ceiling. So finally we come to Form 3, Ascended King in Yellow Valdor, the full-blown, broken, hacked-filled King in Yellow. This is Valdor with warp infusion, physical enhancements, and mastery of Enuncia, the language of reality itself. This version clears base Horus, post Davin Horus, and post Molech Horus with room to spare. Despite being Chaos's golden boy, post Molech Horus still suffers from being half a soul, half a god. And I think Valdor's sheer warp precision, combined with his empowered spear and Enuncia, is too much for these forms of Horus. But then we arrive at the 4th form of Horus, slaves to darkness Horus, the complete soul that has been fully reunited due to the sacrifice of Malakirst in the novel Slaves to Darkness. And let me tell you, Herd, this version is terrifying. He has the full weight of chaos behind him, uncut. It's not the most refined or trained power, but it's raw, ugly, and overwhelming. This would be a highly difficult fight for Valdor. But here's the thing, we know from the end and the death that Horus isn't immune to Enuncia. Olanna's person uses it and sends Horus flying across his throne room. That tells us Valdor could, in theory, strike true. If he lands the right blow at the right moment with the right command, he could win. Maybe just barely. But then we come to God Emperor Horus, the 5th and final form of Horus Lupercal. And yeah, no shot. Valdor has no chance. This is the final form, the big cheese, the chaos-crowned Emperor of mankind. At this point, Horus has surpassed the Emperor so much that the Emperor has to ascend into a godlike state called the Dark King just to challenge him. Let that marinate for a second. This Horus could manipulate reality at will, regenerate from nearly anything, and had the psychic might on the level of warp deities. And the Emperor had to ascend to the Dark King, the 5th Chaos God, to even challenge him. Ascended, King in Yellow Valdor gets deleted. Even with his warp enhanced might, his Enuncia mastery, and his dueling skills, it's GG. Thanks for playing. I'm not gonna lie, I love power scaling Horus Lupercal. Watching him evolve through the heresy from a noble son to a corrupted warlord to a chaos avatar is one of the sickest power arcs in all of 40k. Dude goes through more transformations than a Dragon Ball villain, and I'm here for all of it. Anyways, sorry guys, this video went down a complete K-hole. Wait, no, I mean milk hole. Power scaling is too damn fun sometimes. Ascended King in Yellow Valdor is strong, like insanely strong, But even with all that wild warp sauce and forbidden knowledge, he still doesn't reach the apex. That throne belongs to the final form of Horus Lubrical, chief amongst Primarchs, champion of Chaos Undivided, and one of the scariest beings to ever walk the galaxy. So before ending this video, let's summarize how Valdor and each of his autistically created forms did against each of the Primarchs. Base 30k Valdor, the Emperor's Spear, peak human skill, unmatched amongst the Custodians, but still bound by mortal limits. He can match a Primarch in technique, but he's definitely not outclassing one. Grounded King in Yellow is the same lethal form, now armed with deep warp knowledge from the Apollonian Spear. He beats low-tier Primarchs like Lorgar or Alpharius, might be able to edge out some mid-tier Primarchs with flawless execution, but high-tier Primarchs like Angron or Magnus are a coin toss. Ascended King in Yellow has full warp augmentation, Annuncia mastery, and reality-cutting strikes. Low-tier Primarchs get blitzed, mid-tier Primarchs fall with difficulty, and even high-tier Primarchs like Fulgrim and Angron are winnable fights. Only Sanguinius and Magnus could reliably push him to the limit. And then against Horus, Grounded King in Yellow can take base and post-Davin Horus, but folds to post-Molech Horus. Ascended King in Yellow Valdor can take base Horus, post-Davin Horus, post-Molech Horus, and possibly slaves to Darkness Horus, but definitely loses to God Emperor Horus. And that, herd, does it for this video. I have no idea how we autistically ended up with creating two various alternative forms of Valdor, but I guess here we are. I hope this deep dive gave you some fresh perspectives to chew on. Whether you're rolling with the classic no broken buffs Valdor, the Grounded King in Yellow version armed with warp tricks, or the full-on warp-infused nightmare that could genuinely shake a Primarch to their core, Ascended King in Yellow Valdor. There's a lot to unpack here, and honestly, it makes no sense, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you've got a killer question, a wild theory, or even just a crazy what-if scenario you want me to break down, don't be shy, drop it in the comments below. I seriously love interacting with you all, and so many of my best videos come straight from your ideas or conversations. You're the reason this channel thrives, and I want to keep making content that hits hard and keeps you coming back for more. So keep those cow brainwaves firing, and trust me, I'm always listening. Yes, always, even when you're asleep. Just kidding. Or am I? Also, just a little teaser for you all, I'm thinking about continuing this hypothetical series. Maybe we'll dive into Malcador's true power, or what Luther could really bring to the table if he's unleashed everything he's got. These guys definitely deserve a power scaling video in the future, so if you want to see that, let me know. Your support and ideas drive what comes next. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, herd. Remember to stay milked, stay curious, and I'll see ya in the next video.